Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to talk about invasive alien species issues to all staff today. Invasive alien species are a direct driver of biodiversity loss and designated as a cross-cutting issue of the convention. You may recall that agricultural production land and fishery stocks are heavily impacted by invasive alien species, and therefore invasive alien species management is critical for achieving sustainable development goals. The CBD text clearly stipulated that the parties should prevent introduction of, control, or eradicate those alien species which threaten ecosystems, habitats, or species. Later, confluence of the parties included pests, pathogens, and hazards to biodiversity in decisions on invasive alien species. However, at the national level, it is not easy task to prevent the introductions. For example, the same species behaved differently in the different parts of the world. On the left-hand side, the green anole is an endangered species in the home country, but they are heavily invaded in the Pacific Islands, and they are many parties designated this as an invasive alien species to control. On the right, the chytrid fungus of its pandemic threatened more than 500 amphibian species globally, but when you look at the susceptibility of frogs in different countries, they are different in different regions. So it is very important to have an in situ evidence to address invasive alien species. In response to this complex issue, the data, it provides a very important role. And global register of introduced and invasive alien species became accessible via CBD clearinghouse mechanism this month. And thanks to IUCN and Invasive Species Specialist Group, as well as Global Biodiversity Information Facility, when you scroll down each country profile page and clicking on invasive alien species button, it brings you to the countries introduced and invasive species. Although this text is small, species occurrence, introduction pathways, invasion stage, and distribution within a country became accessible and downloadable. And importantly, all information was validated by local experts with their evidences and peer-reviewed references. And these datasets are the most reliable and up-to-date information source on invasive species occurrences and their impacts. And this global database revealed a total number of alien taxa already spread outside their natural range, which is literally over 22,000. And 4,000 species are already identified as invasive alien species. Which means that 1 out of 5 or 6 alien species became invasive, and those 4,000 taxa already established became a new burden on the parties to prevent their spread. This is the evidence of the new introductions of invasive alien species. They collected from all those publications throughout the period 1500 to 2014, and after 1800 it was a constant growth of new introductions of alien species. And another important message from here is that when you look at the evidence in different groups of organisms, algae and vertebrate species, as well as mollusks, and some insects, they are suddenly increased their introductions in 1950s. At the same time, when you looked at the normalized export value at the global level, the sudden change happened in 1950s. So it is clear that some trade issues are related to the introduction of alien species. And I would like to show some of the international agreements that set safe trade standards relevant to invasive alien species. As shown on the slide, many of them were established earlier than the CBD, and their national authorities have had set legally binding measures in response to them. And usually those are responsible by the Ministries of Agriculture and Health. And note that global invasive alien species measures, including CBD, are set to protect animals, plants, and human health in a mutually supportive manner. And of course, cross-sectoral collaboration is important for their effective implementations. And this is the International Plant Protection Convention, and this organization was set primarily for healthy crop production. Therefore, it is critical to achieve sustainable development goals related to the food security. So as OIE is responsible for primarily domesticated animals' health and animal product safety and security in the international trade. As it covers some of the wildlife diseases, they are an important partner of the CBD to address animal pathogens and zoonotic diseases. It also considers food security, economic development in both terrestrial and aquatic environments. So relevant SDGs are also dependent on the good implementation of this international agreement. And WHO has not formally joined the Interagency Liaison Group on Invasive Alien Species, but they are part of the standard-setting bodies under the WTO SPS agreement for food safety, and international health regulations covers emerging infectious diseases for humans. So regarding prevention of zoonotic diseases, their participation to the liaison group is, yes, of course, urged, and the WHO is responsible for human health at the global level. So I would put health-related targets. Under the circumstances surrounding trade, agriculture, and health sectors, their regulatory guidance is now urges on some actions for invasive alien species. And this study in 2017 revealed global state of invasion patterns and policy responses. And they found more than half of invasive alien species were introduced unintentionally, which seems to be through pathways of escape, stowaway, and contaminants, all related to trade and transport. And please take note that the risk of unintentional biological invasions are unlikely to be assessed when they are shipping. Although CBD voluntary guidance recommends to include such risks in risk analysis. So it is very important to collaborate with those trade and transport sector to ensure that there are biological invasion risks associated with the unintentional introductions. Unintentional introduction of pathogenic organisms is also a growing risk in trade in wildlife. This includes legal trade of wildlife and also e-commerce. And this paper shows that mammal populations pose great risk of spillover of infectious viruses, such as rodents, and primate and bats are likely to harbor zoonotic viruses. It concludes minimizing interactions between wildlife and domesticated animals and limiting close contact with wildlife are needed. And this action should be taken by wildlife management sector in collaboration with public health and animal health sectors, but certainly not by the public health response after the outbreak. We should note that prevention of spillover and spread are the matter of wildlife management. And this slide shows pathways of spillovers in recent coronavirus outbreaks. Although the pathways of SARS-CoV-2 evolution is still not clear, their suspected origin and perhaps numerous steps of intermediate host species in wildlife are involved. In the cases of SARS and MERS, the bat origin viruses obtained virulence while they infected cats or camels prior to attaining human-to-human transmission capacity. So it is important to note that when origins are within the wildlife, they are mostly dormant. In case of coronaviruses, there is no way to detect their pathogenicity in humans in the cases of those coronaviruses. And due to such character of retroviruses, we need to realize that trade and transport of living wildlife species are very dangerous to animals and human health. And this is the conclusion for today. Available data shows that establishment of alien species and their impacts, the unintentional introduction via international trade and transport still cause new introductions, including hazard microorganisms with the risk of zoonotic diseases. So CBD, in collaboration with the Interagency Liaison Group on Invasive Alien Species, submitted last year an informal document to ECOSOC Subcommittee of Experts on the Transport of Dangerous Goods to propose consideration on environmentally hazardous organisms as dangerous goods. So I just wanted to acknowledge with those colleagues from different organizations, and we wish to have a new pathway to make sure that those hazardous organisms will be covered under the international regulatory framework. I finish my presentation, and this additional slide may help the discussion. This slide shows the overview of the process of biological invasions and possible measures. Thank you very much.